Zach Wilson struggles, and the Jets cannot get out of their own way in a loss to the Patriots. What happened? We'll talk about it today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, October 31st, 2022. Happy Halloween. I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Well, we are here to break down a Jets loss. The Jets' 4-game winning streak is over. Their opportunity to go 6-2 was squandered yesterday as they fell to the New England Patriots 22-17 at MetLife Stadium. The Jets fall to 5-3. They had a chance to go 6-2. They had a chance to be playing for first place, not just in the AFC East, but in the entire AFC next week against Buffalo had they beaten New England. But they fell. A game that I think is very frustrating, a game that feels like it got away from the Jets. It is not the type of game where it felt like the Jets were totally outclassed. In fact, statistically speaking, the Jets kind of dominated the game. The Jets had 6.7 yards per play on offense. They allowed 3.8, so the Jets were 3 yards better per play than New England. But all that matters is the scoreboard, and the Jets were not good enough on the scoreboard, and there are plenty of reasons you can point to that the Jets lost this game. And I hate to say it, because I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but I think it's true. The most significant performance in that game yesterday was the performance of Zach Wilson. And that's not to say it's all Zach Wilson's fault. I think sometimes when we talk about the quarterback play, it's viewed that we either have to say it's 100% the quarterback or 0% the quarterback. Well, it's not. There were other reasons the Jets lost the game. But if we're just talking about the big storylines for the Jets, both short-term and long-term, I mean, I hate to say it, but Zach Wilson has to be the number one storyline because he was bad in this game. He got off to a good start. I think the first 29 minutes were pretty good, but then he throws an interception right before the half. The Jets are up 10-3. He throws an interception. Now, the Jets, we'll get to this later, the Jets had a defensive touchdown was wiped off the board on a penalty, but essentially they gave that interception was the first domino that really gave New England life, and Wilson really struggled in the second half. He was not making good reads. He was abandoning the pocket early. And frankly, he was not that different than he was the last 2 weeks against Green Bay and Denver. The difference is that the Jets did not have a run game. They did not have a running back in Breece Hall who could compensate for a lack of a passing game in this one. And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, if you've been paying attention to Zach Wilson, that performance is not that different from what we've seen the last couple of weeks. It just is not. And Zach Wilson's really struggling right now. Even when he got off to a hot start in this game, I'm not sure that the things he was doing are really repeatable over the long run because he's just not winning from the pocket. It seems like he's having a lot of difficulty making reads. So there were a couple plays where, he kind of showed some movement skills and hit a deep pass, but he's not making complex reads. He's not even really making reads when they're hitting big plays. To the extent the Jets have been hitting big plays in recent weeks, and this is stuff I've seen on the film, it's because of play design. It's because defenders are moving out of their areas. It's because the Jets are hitting on something big because there's a broken play. It's not because Zach Wilson's winning from the pocket. And that was even true when they were hitting some big plays yesterday. When there was a little pop pass to Garrett Wilson. He was able to hit Garrett Wilson on another big play early in the game. But, there was a touchdown he threw to Tyler Conklin that gave the Jets the lead in the first half. And that's kind of the point the Jets need to get Zach Wilson too, because again, he was essentially making a pre-snap read. He saw he had Conklin one-on-one, and he was confident at that point. So he delivered a strike. And that's pretty much like the best you can get from Zach Wilson right now. He's way too quick to abandon the pocket. He is very, very shaky when he feels pressure. When he feels pressure, he's backpedaling. You've heard of one read and go quarterbacks, and these are quarterbacks who they look at their first read, and if the first read's open, they throw it to him. If the first read's not open, they just scramble. Zach Wilson's like a one read and not one read and go guy, but a one read and like backwards diagonal, because he's just backpedaling and he's rolling to his right or maybe rolling to his left. It's not a winning formula. And I don't want to be too hard on Zach, but you look at the last couple of weeks, it's been pretty similar. And honestly, I don't think that performance is that different from what you've seen from Zach Wilson at this point in his career. Yeah, I know the Jets were winning games, but wins are not a quarterback stat. And we've reached a point 18 games into his career where it's a little early to say, he's inexperienced, and that's the reason we can dismiss this. You can easily make an excuse for a given play. You could say, well, that wasn't all Zach Wilson's fault. You can easily make an excuse for a game and say, okay, that was a tough matchup. But we're now 18 games into Zach Wilson's career. Do you know how many of those 18 games in which Zach Wilson has played where he's had a passer rating that was better than league average? 2 out of 18 games he's had a passer rating better than league average. It's not that he's inconsistent. It's not that he's failing to be Patrick Mahomes right now. He's not growing. He's not showing signs of being a competent quarterback. And it was easy enough to get past when the team was winning because Breece Hall, you had a running back who could just make it happen on his own. Well, yesterday the Jets did not need Zach Wilson to be great yesterday. They needed him to be functional. And he was not for much of the game. And he threw 3 horrible interceptions. The one right before the half is really frustrating because he felt pressure, he backpedaled, he threw off his back foot, the ball sailed on him. And as much as anything, it's the lack of understanding of game situation. Jets are up there at that point. And that point of the game, it felt like the Jets were in control. So you want to score before the half, but the biggest thing is don't make a momentum-turning mistake, especially heading into the locker room, because the Patriots really did not know what had hit them at that point. Jets were in control of the game. I mean, I gave you the numbers. In this game, the Jets outgained New England by 3 yards per play. Just don't make the big mistake. And then the second half, just through each interception, it felt like it was worse than the last one. There's one where it looked to me like he was throwing it away. And there was another issue that's popped up with Zach is when he's throwing the ball away, he's still not throwing the ball out of bounds. You got to put the ball on the back of the sideline, the back of the bench. He's not doing that. But then some of his post-game comments suggested he didn't throw it away. So very odd. Third interception. These were all horrible interceptions. There are interceptions and there are interceptions. And these were really bad interceptions. Very easy. As I said last year, when Zach threw 4 interceptions in the game at home against New England, it's very easy to look at a game like this, just look at the box score and say, well, it was Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick really drives young quarterbacks crazy. Much like last year, this was not a Bill Belichick thing. This was not Bill Belichick cooking up some exotic scheme that really confused a young quarterback. That's what happened in the Darnold ghost game, where you went back on the film and you saw Darnold had a horrible game, but you could see where a young quarterback would just be totally overwhelmed by what Belichick was cooking up in that game. This is Zach Wilson just making unforced error after unforced error. And again, if you've been paying attention, he's been putting a lot of balls into harm's way over the last couple of weeks. It's just nobody cared because the team was winning and because they weren't getting intercepted. I think Zach was probably a little unlucky that all 3 of those ended up being interceptions, but it balances out because he was also very lucky to not have an interception in 3 weeks the way he had been playing the game. So I think it's a tough spot right now for the Jets because you're not in the situation you were with Sam, where you've surrounded this quarterback with nothing and he doesn't really have a chance to grow. You're kind of back in the situation you were in 2009-2010 with Mark Sanchez, because you have a team that can actually win games if they just get credible quarterback play. And they're not getting it right now. And I understand, listen, you want to say he's 18 games into his career, that's fine, but we're also getting kind of deep into his career to not see the upside. And that to me, as much as anything, is the concerning thing, is for all of the talk of Zach Wilson's upside, we haven't seen it so far. Again, 2 games league, and I'm not saying great, I'm saying league average passer rating. 2 games out of 18. That's not good enough. And it makes me question how high the ceiling is. You know, when he came out of BYU, you saw the play, all the throws on the run, you saw the big arm. Well, at this point of his career, it has to be just more than he's got a big arm. There are lots of guys who have big arms in the NFL who really are not effective quarterbacks. And honestly, the arm is overrated. Arm strength is overrated when we talk about elite quarterback play. The difference between an elite arm and an arm that's good enough, not that big. Now, there's a big difference between somebody who's got an arm that's too weak to play and an arm that's good enough. That's a different story. But arm strength has diminishing returns at some point when you're talking about NFL quarterbacks. And there just hasn't been a lot of playmaking ability. It's lots of mistakes, not a lot of playmaking ability, very little growth from the pocket. I'm not saying it's over for Zach. It's not over for Zach Wilson. He's the starting quarterback. You want to turn this thing over to Mike White or Joe Flacco or Chris Trevler? I mean, I don't think that's an option. I don't think any of those are options. So I'm not saying it's over for Zach. Listen, he's going to have a lot of time. He's going to have 9 weeks to turn this thing around, 9 games to turn this thing around. So it's not over for Zach Wilson. And you hope to see growth going forward. You hope to see him get a little bit more comfortable in the pocket. But I think if we're being honest right now, he's not where he needs to be. He's not even close to where he needs to be. And it is time, I think, to be concerned. But I don't mean to make it sound like Zach Wilson was the only issue in this game for the Jets, because there were failures in plenty of areas. And as we continue here on this Locked On Jets Monday recap, we're going to talk about some of the big plays that turned this game around and allowed the New England Patriots to steal the victory from the Jets at MetLife Stadium. That's as we continue on this Monday. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. I think we've found out the last couple of years that taking care of your mental health is really important. It's just as important as taking care of your physical health. Many different ways you can do it, from talking to a friend, to meditation, to exercise. But therapy can also be a great option. It has plenty of benefits. It helps you learn coping skills, self-empowerment. It helps you deal with trauma. Everyone deserves to feel their best, and BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. It's all the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist, and if things are not clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It could not be simpler. There are no waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter to the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insight only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Today we are talking about a New York Jets loss. The 4-game winning streak is over. Did not get to 5 games. They could not beat the Patriots. Frustrating game. This was not... Listen, if you're a Jets fan, you know through the years, games against New England have been tough because New England's always been the better team than the Jets. I don't know that that's the case this year. I think at worst, these teams are equal in talent. You're not going up against Tom Brady. You can't look at this and say, oh, we're going up against the greatest quarterback of the last 50 years. Maybe the greatest quarterback of all time, because you're not. You're going up against Mac Jones, who struggled quite a bit in this game, if we're going to be honest. The Jets could not get out of their own way, though. And through the first 29 minutes, it felt like the Jets were dominating. It really felt like it was a 7-point game. It felt like the Jets were in control. The Patriots were having trouble moving the ball against them. And it all kind of unraveled. And the first piece of the unraveling was the Zach Wilson interception. But after that, there was a huge play, probably the biggest play of the game. Because Mac Jones threw a pick 6, and Michael Carter II picked it off. He ran it back for a touchdown. It was Carter's second interception of the day. The first one was really nice, too. I mean, it was a ball that kind of floated. I think Jones's arm got hit. Ball floated. Michael Carter tracked it like a center fielder. I mean, he covered a ton of ground and made a great catch. Unfortunately, though, the touchdown was wiped off because John Franklin Myers roughed the passer. And I know Jets fans are upset about it. I was winding up to, as I was watching the game, I was really going to get upset about it. That's roughing the passer, folks. I mean, I'm sorry. It just is. John Franklin Myers did not need to do that. And you know something? You want to say it was borderline fine, but John Franklin Myers did not need to make that hit. John Franklin Myers put the officials in a position where a call could go against the Jets. You have to understand what you're dealing with in today's NFL. I'm sorry, you don't like the call, that's fine, but you don't put yourself in a position where that flag could be thrown. And John Franklin Myers did. And instead of the Jets being up 17-3 in total control, New England reeling on offense, the Patriots were able to get a field goal. That was a 10-point play right there. And it just felt like the Jets were kind of unnerved by that, because the opening kickoff of the second half was short by Braden Mann. Patriots went right down the field and scored on a touchdown. Now, there was a fourth down play they scored the touchdown on where there was borderline pass interference. But the Jets got mixed up in their line. The Jets got totally miscombobulated lining up. They had guys in the wrong spot. LaMarcus Joyner did not see where he was supposed to go. He was late as a guy went out in motion out of the backfield. The Jets just got lined up completely incorrectly. And that was part of the story, too, for the touchdown. And the Jets got the ball back, then they missed a field goal. It was ugly. I mean, the drive the Patriots scored the touchdown on began with a big run that went against the Jets because both safeties missed a tackle. Jets had a lot of big punt return. Zach Wilson threw two more interceptions. That period between the last minute of the second quarter and the third quarter, it just felt like the Jets got completely unnerved. It felt like, and I said this on Friday, I mentioned that this was a game that I felt like was going to test the maturity of this football team. And the Jets have been so good this year in key spots. They have not been phased by pressure situations. It felt like maybe the moment was a little too big for them yesterday in the last minute of the second quarter and the third quarter, because they kind of came unglued. Now, they think the defense played a decent game overall. In fact, the defense probably is going to get too much grief because they kept allowing third down conversions in the first half where the linebackers were playing poorly. But overall, it was a very good game for the defense. The defensive line had a great game. Quinnen Williams registers another sack. He's playing exceptional football. But that stretch, early in the third quarter, Jets just had miscue after miscue. The offense wasn't doing anything. Zach Wilson, again, I felt like he lost all confidence after that interception. It's not that Zach was playing spectacular football before that, but Zach was on his way to one of the best games of his career, the first 29 minutes. But after that interception, it felt like it just all fell apart for him. And it was on Zach. But it was also on, look, the offensive line was terrible in this. Dwayne Brown had a bad game, who's been, had two good games at the start. Now has had two bad games in a row. Oblehi on the other side was not playing well. The offensive line, when you got a young quarterback who's struggling, you got to pick him up a little bit. And the offensive line did not do that. And if the offensive line had blocked better, maybe Zach settles back in. Maybe Zach regains his composure. So you got to give the offensive line some grief in this game, because while the bigger story is Zach Wilson's, and especially the bigger story as far as the long-term health of the Jets goes, the bigger story is Zach Wilson's struggles. The offensive line did not do a good job. And I mentioned the special team miscues. Greg Zuerlein missed a field goal that could have tied the game in the third quarter, could have provided the Jets with some stability. Braden Mann had a bad punt early. Jets allowed a long punt return in the second half as things were falling apart for them. It was just all around. Barrios had a horrible game as a returner. It just felt like everything fell apart for the Jets between the end of the second quarter and the third quarter. A game that they were in total control of, and they made miscue after miscue. And that's how you lose. That's how you lose when you outgain your opponents by 3 yards per play. And if there are Patriots fans who are watching this who are upset that I'm saying that the Jets, made these miscues that cost them the game, you shouldn't be, because part of winning in the NFL is avoiding those mistakes. And the Patriots made some mistakes. Mac Jones, I don't think, played that well. The Jets made bigger mistakes. The Jets have avoided these mistakes. It's part of the reason the Jets have won is they've been able to avoid these mistakes to this point. They were not able to avoid them in this game. It felt like they just lost their composure after those two plays at the end of the second quarter. It doesn't feel like they were able to recover. And, one other thing that needs to be said, Mike LaFleur. And in a game where the Jets, did move the ball at times, but Mike LaFleur has got to get over this Elijah Moore thing. If you don't want Elijah Moore on the team, trade him or suspend him or deactivate him. But for him to play less snaps than Braxton Berrios and Jeff Smith, that's a joke. That's an absolute joke. Especially, if we're playing, this is the NFL. Talent matters. So something, I understand you're upset with the guy. He's more talented. He should be on the field. If you got such an issue with him that he's not you don't think he should be playing, then deactivate him. But when he's active and you're putting Jeff Smith on the field more than him, that's you saying you think Jeff Smith gives the Jets a better chance to win, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world. And especially in that second half when the offense was struggling, when Zach was struggling, and you were down playmakers because you don't have Breece Hall and you got Corey Davis out in this game. For you to like put more on the bench to try and prove your points, try and prove you're the boss. Ridiculous. If you don't want, again, I don't have a problem if you don't want to play him. If he's such a problem, that's fine. But when you're dressing him and you're not putting him on the field, and you're essentially, the message you're saying is Jeff Smith is a better player than Elijah Moore. Well, is it true that Jeff Smith, is a guy the coaches like more? Well, sure, but should they? I mean, I saw Jeff Smith down 2 scores in the fourth quarter, waste time. A well-coached player gets the ball. His team's down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. A well-coached player, if the clock's running, after a catch goes down, gets the ball to the official immediately so the official can spot it. You can get up to the line and run the play. Jeff Smith's flipping the ball away, so he's celebrating. Yeah, because you're so impressive, Jeff Smith. One catch. Very impressive, Jeff Smith. Great stuff. You're down 13. Who cares about winning the game? Jeff Smith made a catch. But does this get addressed by the coaching staff? No. Mike LaFleur needs to grow up. Grow up. Ridiculous. Anyway, end of rant. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to conclude our Monday game recap. We're going to talk about some of the positives that came from this game. There were some playmakers who stepped up for the Jets, so I'll end my rant about Jeff Smith, and we'll talk about some of the positives, because we want to end things on a positive note, even after a loss. That's as we continue this Monday recap. Well, certainly there's no celebration in the Jets fan base today, but there might be a special moment coming up in your life. Whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or even let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench of jewelers will then help you handcraft her perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring, or if you're looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but you're still having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift on every budget. Shop stress-free with Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped, free and discreet packaging, and they also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. Again, that's BLUENILE.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday, recapping a Jets loss. Let's end the show on a positive note, though, because some guys stepped up in this game. Listen, if you're a regular listener, you know I'm very hard on Tyler Conklin. I think he's not been very good this year. He played great yesterday. And he had a couple catches. That last touchdown was garbage time, which has been the story of Conklin's season. But he was phenomenal in this game. This was the best game the Jets have gotten the tight end position in some time. He made one play where this was the guy I was expecting the Jets to get. The guy who was really tough to bring down in the open field. I mean, he did one play where he broke probably 3 tackles or so. He was just a guy who was tough to bring down. He had a touchdown catch early. This was the Tyler Conklin I was hoping we'd see from the Jets this year. So maybe it's a good sign. Maybe it's just one game, but full credit to Tyler Conklin. Again, I'm very hard on Tyler Conklin when he does poorly. So I want to make sure that I give him a shout out because he was excellent in this game. This was his best game as a Jet by far. Another guy who stepped up, Denzel Mims. And maybe this was also garbage time too, so I shouldn't be giving him too much credit, but Mims had a great run after a catch. He turned what should have been a routine catch into a 63-yard gain. He also catch a ball out of bounds. It was a really nice catch. It was just floated a little bit too much for him to get his feet down. And, when I get frustrated with Mike LaFleur, Denzel Mims is kind of a guy I look at, and it makes me reconsider the whole Mims situation, because if you look at what he's done this game and then, that preseason game against the Giants, you see a guy with some skill. Maybe it's a limited skill set. I don't think he's as fast as his time speed, and maybe he needs some kind of a limited route tree for various reasons. But he's a guy with some tools, and it feels like the Jets just are not adapting things to him. So we can get Jeff Smith on the field, but I promised I wouldn't rant about that anymore. But Mims, looking like he can at least contribute a little bit. He's got some tools to bring to the table. So I thought it was a good game for Denzel Mims. I think all around the defense was good. The only exception on the defense were the linebackers, because when the Jets were losing on third downs in the first half, the Patriots just kept getting receivers isolated on crossing routes against linebackers. And I understand these are tough matchups, but there were also plays where they were throwing the ball to the running back and the linebackers weren't where they were supposed to be. I mean, C.J. Mosley probably had about 5 plays on third down where he was responsible for a first down conversion. And then he dropped an interception that turned, in the second half, that could have turned the game around. Instead, the Patriots got a field goal out of it. So it was at least a 3-point drop. And that ball was like right into his head. That ball was tipped. There was nothing on it. He dropped it. Quincy Williams made a couple bad plays. Even Quan Alexander has been good to this point. Did not play well. And I mentioned the safeties both, had some errors on the New England touchdown drive. But at corner, Sauce Gardner continues to hold up really well. DJ Reed continues to hold up really well. Michael Carter II should have had 2 interceptions. He had 1. He should have had 2. And that second one should have been a huge pick 6 that would have really put the Jets in the driver's seat at halftime, if not for the penalty that was unrelated. The Jets are getting really good play at corner, but they also they were constantly in the backfield in this game. They were constantly getting to the quarterback. The Jets finished this game with 6 sacks. Jacob Martin had 1, Nathan Shepard had 1, John Franklin Myers had 1, Carl Lawson, Michael Clemens, Quinnen Williams, 6 sacks for the Jets in this game. Defensive line did its job. And they even held, aside from the one big run they gave up, which was really the safety's fault, they only allowed 3.7 yards per run. So it was a really good game. Mac Jones seemed really rattled. I thought all around the defensive effort was pretty good. 22 points is still, given the field position they had, 22 points is not bad. 22 points is around what the average NFL team scores. So it was at worst an average defensive performance. The Jets got a little bit more out of their special teams and offense. They could have won this game, but I think they only got a winning effort out of one of their 3 phases of the game, despite the job a couple of the receivers did. And the guy who I thought was the biggest star of the game, I've been saving it, Garrett Wilson stepped up in this game. With Breece Hall gone, you knew multiple guys were going to have to step up, and some did, but Garrett Wilson more than anybody. He looked kind of like week 2 Garrett Wilson again, and maybe he is somebody who can step up and fill that role and be the kind of player who can carry the offense, because the Jets need somebody now that Breece is gone. Wilson had 6 catches, 115 yards. He looked great in this game. He was the best Jet on the field, and if the Jets had won, we'd be talking a lot about him stepping up again in Breece Hall's absence, and we'd be talking again about him the way we were talking about him after that week 2 game in Cleveland. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Both these things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Have a great Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.